Hello, welcome to our. Oh, one of these days I'm going to name this more than just because it's not really an interview. It's don't have a fire down here, so it can't be a fireside chat. Oh, Lunar Dragon. Lunar Dragon now following us. Awesome. Always nice to have some more followers. So I'm your chief librarian, David, and this is Alexandria RPG. We're a nonprofit role-playing game library. We travel to events. We share role-playing games with people at events. This last weekend, we were at SecurCon and NorwestCon. So the first time that we went two different places, and then during the week or between shows, we try to do a couple of these chats, and then we do some gaming live, and Mondays we do news and Kickstarters or crowdfunding, and that kind of leads us to our guest today. So we've got Will from Broken Anvil Miniatures. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Will.
Hey, so I am the lead game designer at Broken Anvil Miniatures. I've been in the industry for a little bit over a decade now, doing game development, game design, organized play development, and community management. I sort of cut my teeth and spent most of my years in the industry at Privateer Press, where I was lead on games like War Machine Hordes, the tabletop war game, Riot Quest, Monster Apocalypse. And one of the last things I worked on before I transitioned from Privateer to Broken Anvil was I was one of the three game designers on the Iron Kingdom's Requiem RPG books that kickstarted and came out. There were the 5e compatible Iron Kingdoms books. And now I'm over at Broken Anvil, working on designing RPG materials for the monthly Patreon, and most importantly, lead game designer on Rivenstone, which is our brand new tabletop miniature skirmish war game, totally new IP set in an awesome new world that goes to Kickstarter next week on the 26th. So we're 1 week away, 7 days till that moment of crushing anxiety, and we get to see how things go.
It's the lead up to the launch is always rough, and then the worst is if you are like just shy of funding in those first couple days, and then everybody ignores you until right at the end.
Oh no, I can't. My heart. The good news is, so we've been putting out a ton of the lore and the gameplay and tutorial videos on the game, and RivenstoneGame.com is actually a launch page for the Kickstarter's got a countdown right now, and people can sign up for a newsletter there, where if they sign up for the newsletter and then they pledge during the Kickstarter, they get a free mystery gift.
Nice.
And we're at like 1,300 signups on the newsletter alone, which is a really good sign, because there's a lot of people that will sign up for newsletter. There's a lot of people like me who I don't personally want any more email, so I wouldn't. So if we've got 1,300 people signed up for that, I feel like our backer number for the actual launch is going to be pretty solid. So that helps eases some of the stress and the anxiety.
Nice. Maybe we'll get new followers based off of you coming here. No, that's good. So I do want to get back to Rivenstone,
Yeah.
but to start off with on the RPG side of the house.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the what you guys have been doing on your Patreon.
Yeah, so Broken Anvil Miniatures has a Patreon every month, and they're on brokenanvilminis.com. The Patreon is all STLs, it's downloadable, and people may also know Broken Anvil Miniatures from the Dungeon Delvers Kickstarter that was both STLs and physical miniatures. But the main Patreon every month, it's $9 a month, and usually it's like 50-ish STL sculpts that people get, and there's a theme every single month. So we've done like the expedition to Scarcrest, which was an expedition out to a frozen island. So we had like snow orcs and worms and ice dragons and stuff like that. We've done the more Fey based month, where it was all red caps and mushlings, and you also get terrain in it to decorate your tables with. So if you want just things that are thematically appropriate to a various biome, region, or dungeon, you get pieces of that as well. And one of the things when I came on, not only was I working on Rivenstone and then other games that we have in development now, but I would pick a selection of miniatures every month and create 5e compatible stat blocks for those creatures, and then make a one-page adventure. It's something that my buddy, a concept artist, Chris Walton, has been doing on his own for a long time, and it's just a really fun challenge. You don't have to spell everything out for the DM or the player. It's just like, in this room there are some of these things. This is a slide that at the bottom is a pit. You don't give DC challenges or anything like that. You just give the bones, and you illustrate the map so that if a DM needs an encounter real quick, or they just need an adventure real fast, you can take out this one-page adventure, take out the stat blocks, and you have what you need to wing it and go from there. Or it might be the inspiration for a big adventure you want to run. It's the appetizer to get people started.
And some people might recognize the Dungeon Delvers. We talked about that on our Monday night news and crowdfunding, because normally I don't bring up miniatures, that people can download and print, just because sometimes there's so many of them on Kickstarter, and I just thought it was a really cool, like, complete world. So it was one that I shared when it was live.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we like to do with the Patreon every month is you get a complete collection. You get something that is cohesive. And I should say, for anybody listening, Rivenstone, the war game we're making, is pure physical, no STLs at all. This is going to be traditional hobby channel, game. So it is I think a lot of people know Broken Anvil for STLs, but hopefully they're about to know Broken Anvil for physical minis as well.
So before you came on, you were talking about how Broken Anvil kind of started off doing larger kind of one-off minis instead of minis for gaming. So how did they really jump into the transferring from doing large minis and busts to doing minis for gaming?
It's interesting. So the owners come from a background of making collectible statues. So if you've ever seen those giant $600,000 statues of your favorite comic book characters, that's the world they came from. And they're big comic book fans, they're big video game fans, and in the last several years they've become big tabletop fans. They've really started to dig into it. One of our owners, Chris, back in the day, huge HeroClix nut, played HeroClix nonstop, but miniatures, traditional hobby miniatures, were something that they hadn't, I guess, messed with too much. And as soon as they started getting into it, they fell in love with it. And so everyone that was at the core of the company sort of made the decision that, okay, if we can make these giant statues that look this cool, we can do minis. And so they started doing minis originally as just the STLs and Dungeon Delvers, and then it quickly became they wanted to make their own game. They wanted to make their own world, their own setting, and so they started assembling a team of game designers, game developers, lore writers, and so we have come sort of in the last year and a half, 2 years, coagulated into the force that we are now.
Nice. So let's talk a little bit about the tabletop game that's getting ready to go to Kickstart, because that is it's a big leap for many reasons. One, I mean, they transition from making these big, expensive, limited print stuff to doing STLs. Now you're going to be doing physical stuff, and you're going to be trying to get that out to stores all over the place.
Yep.
And you've worked for Privateer Press. Is there anything that you are bringing on board from Privateer Press that they maybe were lacking prior to this campaign that's getting ready to launch?
I'll say one thing that Chris and Hannah and Brandon and Steven, all the owners, did is they quickly recognized the things that they knew and the things that they didn't know or need to learn more about. And the team we have, if you combine everyone's experience, like on their resumes, it's decades and decades. I think it's well over a century of just work experience put together. We have a lot of people on the team that have been working in the industry, from our digital engineers to our retail sales manager, marketing people. It's a lot. So they kind of were really smart about how they drafted the team together to make sure that we could come to handle challenges like that they were going to be suddenly shipping out to a lot of different stores, shipping this physical product. And then they also have made some really, I think, really brave and really smart decisions on how they're going to produce the material. Everything in Rivenstone is going to be made out of COcast hard, which is a new-ish material hitting the market. You're starting to see more miniatures made out of it that you're able to produce a lot of it very quickly. And when it comes out on the sprues out of the molds, you clip it off the sprues, and then the sprues get melted back down and go back into the machine to make more miniatures. So there's no waste out of it. So it's incredibly eco-friendly as well. But they've been building up in terms of how we're going to, shipping everything out, all those distribution channels. There's a lot of logistics that are going on, and it's really nice that the owning team listens to everyone. One of us kind of says, okay, here's what we think we should do. Tell us what your experience says, and we all sort of collaborate to make the best decisions we possibly can to get this to as many people as we can. On my end, as a game designer, it's been great because I'll play stuff with Chris, for example, and he'll ask me a question, and I'll explain why a rule is written that way or why we're doing top-down narrative design in a certain aspect. And even if he necessarily doesn't agree sometimes, he listens and he goes, okay, what you're saying makes a lot of sense. I defer to your judgment, and, lets me kind of put the ball in my court and let me run with it, which is how I like to work. So that's been really nice.
Nice. Yeah, it's there's so many things to think about, coming to market, because I mean, it was a huge deal when Privateer Press came out. I remember Page 5 very well. the very early people pushing the Privateer Press products with that Page 5 actually made it some enemies early on, because they kind of pushed the semi-casual or people that were interested on getting the game out to stores. Do you have anything kind of like the model that other companies have tried, getting the product into some people's hands so they can just play it in the stores and get people excited about it?
Yeah, so there's a few things we did. We went to Adepticon and demoed to as many people as we could, as many store owners that were at Adepticon, and the reception we got was phenomenal. People loved the game. Myself, Faye, our game developer, and some other team are going to be doing a tour of game stores in the local Pacific Northwest and demoing to as many people as we can. Now, that's just our local area, obviously.
Yeah.
During the Kickstarter, we're going to have a retailer pledge for stores that want to get in, so that for those groups that want to get into Rivenstone but still want to give sales to their store, they can sort of go to their store, give them their money, and then the store can do a retailer pledge, and it all goes through them. And then in terms of early demo product, right now where we're at is we've been sending out hobby review product to YouTubers and other hobbyists that are known in the industry for them to check out the material. Where the game's at is the game is fully edited, rules-wise, and ready to play. We have all the stat cards, all the tokens, all the dice, all the measurement tools. The rule book is in graphic design, because the rule book, of course, needs lots of diagrams and stuff like that. This is not a Kickstarter where we've got the game done and it's a pre-order system. We are kickstarting to fund and launch. So once we fund and launch and we can make additional copies, I think our retail sales manager is looking into the best way to see if demo copies are available to stores, or how to get stores to create the hype in their local communities to get that group of people playing. But we're not at the point right now where we could send out full copies, mainly just because the rule book's got to get gussied up and ready to go.
So looking at the COcast stuff, are the minis? So you said things are recyclable. Are the minis going to be fully assembled when they go out, or are they going to be like other where you're going to have to people will assemble them and modify them as they choose?
Yeah, this is a traditional hobby miniature game in that you're going to get your pieces and you're going to have to put them together, paint them yourself, which is part of a real joy of the hobby, is making your team your guys. And this is a low model count game. Per player, you're looking at 8 to 15 models per side. And these are big, chunky 35 millimeter scale models. So when you get them in your hands, you're going to be like, oh, these are pretty big for miniatures. They're very easy to paint because of that. But you don't have a lot to paint. And the starter boxes that we're creating that have all the rules and tokens and everything you need to play. A lot of starters get you a handful of models and they go, okay, this lets you sort of demo the game with your buddies, but then you need to go spend X number of $100 more to get a full-size force. Every Rivenstone starter is a full-size army. So it's once you buy a box, you're ready to play as soon as you have a friend to fight against. And then every miniature you buy beyond that for the game is just something that you feel like you want to play and add on to it. But I'm excited. Like, so we gave away free minis at Adepticon. We wanted people to try COcast. We wanted them to use the material, see what they felt like about cleaning it and painting it. And we're already seeing on social media people posting their painted versions of the miniatures. And again, the response has been really positive because if anyone's worked with resin or hard plastic minis before, COcast is going to be very similar to that style if you're used to using that kind. So not quite like sprued hard plastic and not soft plastic like PVC, but just like kind of that right in between.
Okay. The model maker and painter in me, a million questions. Let's see.
Yeah.
Will there be release agents and stuff like that you'll have to clean off of them?
Nope. Right out the mold, you're good to go. You don't have to clean it. And you use super glue, not plastic glue on these. We get that question a lot because of the material, but this is a super glue one. Also, the models are all keyed together, so when you get them, like arm will socket into body in one way. You'll see very clearly how you're going to assemble your pieces.
Nice. And then people will start modifying them.
Yes, of course.
I've actually talked to years ago. I talked to a sculptor, and he goes, I always love to see what people do to modify my sculpts. He goes, but I'm also sad that people sometimes take my sculpts and make better things out of them.
It's the industry we're in, right? Like conversions and making it your own is such a huge part of things. I mean, it's off camera right now, but my display case of miniatures is right across from my office right now, and the entire top two shelves, all those miniatures on there are highly converted. Nothing on there looks anything like it's supposed to.
I have debated setting up a paint studio again. I used to paint miniatures for other people ages ago, and I have contemplated setting that back up just because it was kind of enjoyable and made okay money.
Yeah, I mean,
let's see. So you worked on the re-release of Iron Kingdoms.
Yes.
What's that like working on something that's it's an already established game that you're trying to reinvigorate with new rules?
It was interesting because the Iron Kingdom setting has so much lore and history to it, and it goes back so far that working on it was really, we knew we were going to go 5e, and a big part of it was how do we take the framework of 5e and make it feel like, for people that know Iron Kingdoms that have been playing the 2d6 version or the old 3.5 version of how it originally launched, they have a feeling. They know about warjacks. They know how the magic works. They understand the differences in the world of Kane versus other traditional fantasy worlds. Now we're going to put this in the 5e framework where you have things like teleport and wish and so on that doesn't really exist in the Iron Kingdom. So a big part of it was marrying the two of the well-established narrative and then figuring out how to take this framework that wasn't ours originally and put the two together. And that involved creating a lot of new material. We made a ton of new classes, subclasses, spells, equipment, entire new systems for how Mechanica worked. So the creative aspect of it was less on generating new material and that I'm coming up with a brand new idea for something, and more I have the material, now I have to be creative in how do I make this circle fit into this square and then still make it feel right. And because the biggest thing of RPGs is they're so narrative. If you create something that functions fundamentally, like the rules fidelity is solid and you're like, oh well, this plays right, it's well balanced, but people are like, why does this fireball make everyone fall down and then teleport away? That's not a fireball. That's not what fireballs do. You have to get that groove lined up, and that was most of the work.
Yeah, that's always those rough little things, trying to get the world feel right, especially if it's a world that is already existing. Just like making a cartoon or a movie based on comic books. You don't want to step on the established thing that has made everybody happy for all these
Right.
years.
Right.
So, one of our questions, let's see. As a former lead developer at Privateer Press, you were
Mm-hmm.
stovepiped into developing games with an existing properties such as War Machine. Now, through
Mm-hmm.
Broken Anvil, you had complete freedom to go in new directions. What are new areas of gameplay you're able to explore in Riverstone that you were unable to previously?
Um, so working on Rivenstone has been, this world is growing as we're developing the game. And from the moment I came in, God, how long has it been? It's about a year ago now since I've been on, maybe a little bit longer. Time has no meaning because of COVID. Um, since I came on, we had a lot of framework, but every time we're building new things, we're coming up with new ideas. There's a lot of like, the difference between working on established IP and making things fit and working on a brand new IP while making the game at the same time is that you get to create a lot. There's a lot of blank canvas. There's a lot of blue sky. And so it can kind of be like, hey, is this a cool thing that fits in the world? It would make for really good gameplay. Well, it doesn't exist. Okay, should it exist? And then we get to have these really deep lore conversations about the world of, does this fit the narrative we're trying to tell? Is it consistent? And then how can we tweak things to make it work? And there's a lot of, I get to be very, very creative on a daily basis, not just making a rule from scratch on a blank piece of page or making a new game mechanic, but making completely brand new characters, making new stories, new narratives. One thing that Matt Getz and I recently did was we knew the factions that are playable in Rivenstone, and we were fleshing out part of the world where the main game takes place. And we were figuring out our NPC kingdoms, and we went nuts. We had so much fun. We may never make a playable model. There may never be a miniature that represents a single citizen or soldier or king from one of these kingdoms. But it was important that we knew who the neighbors of the warring factions were for the narratives of when they go in those areas and maybe invade or something like that. And because of the nature of Rivenstone, because it is a very wild magic centric world, we're allowed to do really high fantasy, epic, crazy stuff. And so it's been fun to let our imaginations run wild while also just not getting too weird. Like, you never want to get so weird that things aren't familiar anymore. So it's been finding that balance.
You have to have at least a toe somewhere in reality for people to
Yeah.
uh, relate to it, because they're like, oh, this is awesome. Because dragons and stuff, they're just giant lizards. So they no matter how crazy we want to get with dragons, there's a toe in the pool of reality every time we do something with dragons. Same thing
Yeah.
with most monsters or anything that goes bump in the night in any of our fairy tales or stories. There's always that at least a toe or a foot or whatever in the pool of reality.
And sometimes with our way we do it is we come up with this wild idea and then we think about the reality of it and what it would actually mean. I'll give you an example. One of the NPC kingdoms, Strostholm, was primarily seafaring before their area was hit by wild magic, the big wild magic storm, which is we talk more about Rivenstone. This will make sense. One of the effects of their wild magic storm that passed over their kingdom was their main bay that their whole kingdom is situated on turned to glass. So they have this giant sea of glass now, and we're like, so what does that mean for them? They're now glass miners. They're the main export of fine glassware and things like scopes and stained glass windows and things like that. And so we started going down the rabbit hole of what does a glass mine look like? What if you have this giant block of glass as deep as a bay of water that you can drill down into and just be pulling glass out of? And what would it be like to work inside of that? And then we start having illustrators draw it of the idea of like these miners who can see the sun as they're deep underground working because they're in this giant like glass hole. So we start with this really crazy idea. What if the water turned to glass? That's nuts. And then we figure out the logistics and reality of it and figure out, does it fit in this world? And luckily that one did. And I'm very happy that we have this wild area that we can explore later on.
I will say, as soon as you said glass mines, my brain went to glass holes. Um,
Yeah. Also, it's probably really hot in there because the sun is just magnifying the heat of everything.
yeah, there's so many weird little things that you can go into. That it's an interesting idea. Um,
Yeah.
and we understand mines, we understand glass, but we don't have glass mines in the real world. So
Right.
you get to go wild with that.
Yeah.
Um, So one of our questions is kind of so Rivenstone is beginning life as a tabletop skirmish war game. Where do you see the
Yes.
property expanding? Perhaps into RPGs, novels, board games, video games, or will you focus on fleshing out miniatures line for some time before branching out?
No, there are already plans. Because we're building such this robust world and it has this long history and all the characters, and I think we have something really unique within the fantasy genre to offer and some really creative ideas. We're already looking at RPG offerings, possibly graphic novels. There will definitely be, there will be a narrative presented in some way beyond the context of a war game, because war games can give you so much of a story, but it's primarily fighting,
Yeah.
and we have a world where there's more than just fighting going on. Video games, I would love to see that happen one day, but let's get through the Kickstarter first, and then hope that we can get to that point. But if all goes well, I think that one of the core takeaways of Rivenstone is we're not making a game, we're making a world. We're making a new IP that's going to be explored through a variety of mediums, whether you're a tabletop board gamer, RPG, or just a reader. And we want to get as many people to come visit the world as we can.
Okay. On the CO cast,
Yeah.
it is a new and different way. So, what is like the kind of the cost been kicking into that? Because they're still molds and everything, but the plastics are a little different. Is there special equipment that you have to use? Because I know GW was super proud of their spin casting for years, which for metal was great and horrible when they tried to switch to fine cast. Um, so can you talk on that a little bit?
Yeah. So COCast uses their own proprietary machines and materials, and it's own special way of doing things. In terms of the startup cost, unfortunately, that's not something I really know, because that's not the part of the business
Yeah.
I'm involved in. But I can say that I know that for a lot of companies, they have a way of doing things, and making a transition from, say, doing metal spin casting to then resin casting. You have to get all this new equipment. You have to get, look at how you're doing your molds. You have to consider your entire process, even the kind of people you have working on it, and the skill sets, the technical skill sets they have. So often when someone is doing it one way, transitioning from A to B can be costly, because then especially you have to go through your back catalog of molds and say, are we switching everything over to be this new style, or are we going to simultaneously do two different ways of miniature making, metal and resin or plastic, whatever. I think a benefit of Broken Anvil is that they're starting from the ground up. These were the first machines they got. They're not producing miniatures in any other way. Like COCast is the way it's being produced. So everything we have in house to make the miniatures is all the COCast style.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I remember living through the fail cast era of Warhammer.
Oh, when the
Trying
Finecast first came out from Citadel?
Yeah. Oh man, it was so bad because they just literally tried to convert all their spin cast metal stuff to doing. They tried to make a specific resin that would work with it because they'd had so much money invested in that, and you know. The cost of metal was going up, the cost of shipping was going up, and they're like, okay, we got to go another direction. But they had just taken out tons of money based upon their whole spin cast super awesome technology, which is spin casting for metal is a great thing, but it doesn't do resin plastic at all.
Yeah, I never bought any of their resin during that initial transition. I've gotten some, recent years, and it's been great. But anytime you transition, like I was saying, from one material to another, it's always rough for anybody. So hopefully we don't do it. Hopefully we're COCast for a long, long time.
Well, it sounds really cool. Now, I had asked earlier about things being on sprues and stuff. Are you guys, and you're able to recycle the sprues? Are you going to do a sprue recycling program or something where people can just send you boxes of sprues back?
Oh, people won't get sprues. So the way we're going to do it is we're going to clip everything off the sprues and put it into individual little containers for everybody. So you don't have to do any sprue cleanup when you get your miniature. We're going to take care of that for you. And I mean, I say that maybe there's one or two miniatures out there that come with a couple little sprue bits hanging off of them, but in general, everything's going to be cleaned off of them for you.
Okay. Doesn't that add a bunch of extra time?
It does. But we have people that we've hired on that is their job. But the thing about COcast is it's crazy fast how quickly it produces a ton of miniatures. They were doing demonstrations at Adepticon, and they can enter in something in the machine, put the mold in, press a couple buttons, and then, no joke, a minute maybe it comes out. Now it has a cooldown period and stuff after, but its turnover rate of how many miniatures that we can produce in, say, an hour is phenomenal. It's huge. So the time we're saving there, we can have somebody whose job it is A, they're basically doing QC on everything that comes out, because if they're pulling it off the molds, they're getting an up close look with every piece we're sending out. That means there's much less chance that we have any miscasts or any problems going to people that we have to, send replacements to.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I haven't gotten non-sprued stuff in ages. Everything that's non-sprued is always like built. So
Yeah.
I find that I just find that interesting. And then the upside for you guys is you'll have all the sprue to recycle right there,
Which becomes more material, yeah.
Yeah, which I think that's really cool, because I'd always asked, GW for years and other companies, like, hey, is there a way to recycle the sprues? And on the old plastics, no, there wasn't.
Right.
Just like, most people don't realize that a lot of our bottles and stuff, you look at the numbers on the bottom and they're just confusing, and some of them are really recyclable, some of them are kind of recyclable. Well, the stuff we made miniatures out of for ages is not really recyclable.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah, it is. That's one of the coolest things, I think. Especially, we're seeing more companies move towards eco-friendly options, and so having an eco-friendly miniature production option is phenomenal. Especially if we then also have eco-friendly packaging to go with it. It's, leave as little of a footprint as we possibly can.
Exactly. Well, and it just makes sense for, as shipping prices go up. If you're not shipping that extra sprue, if you're shipping a smaller box, a lighter box, a lighter mini, it just makes sense overall. Otherwise, you're wasting your own cash. And as a small company, every penny counts, and those pennies adds up really fast.
Yep.
Somebody asked, is COcast easier to work with than resin from a hobby standpoint?
It's about the same. Having worked with it myself, and I've been doing miniatures. I'm 41 now. I've been doing it since I was 10, back with old Raul Parthas. So I'd say it's about the same as traditional resin. When you get it, the thing you'll notice about it, it's a little bit more pliable. It's a little, and when I say that, don't expect it to be like squishy and bendy. But it's the kind of mini that once you're done with it, if you took a sword on the end of a figure and you bent it, it wouldn't break, and then it would return to its shape very quickly. There's no release agent you have to worry about. The only trick really is when you're cleaning off the mold lines, you might have to put a little bit of extra oomph into it with your X-Acto knife. They do file well, so if you have files for cleaning any of your resin figs, you can use those. But that's about it, I'd say. Very, very similar to resin if you've worked it in the past.
It's good information, because many people out there. I mean, I want people to check out your guys' stuff, even for the game and for the minis that they can get. Because, like I said, I've talked about the minis, some of you guys' minis in the past. And if anybody out there goes to their website and looks through the Broken Anvil minis, looking through their STL files, you can see the quality of minis that they're going to be putting out, or that they're already putting out. So these are things that you can pick up from them now and download in print, which is super cool.
And I would even say the Ravenstone minis, the detail is going to be even finer than the STLs on the Patreon, simply because it's a different process in terms of what we have to create for the digital engineering of something that we have to cut up to then be assembled, versus the STLs, which just come pre-supported and are good to go. So if you go to RavenstoneGame.com and you scroll down, you'll see a couple Ravenstone miniatures on that page, and the quality of those minis is nuts. Like, our sculpting team they're sorcerers. I don't quite understand how they do what they do, but it looks phenomenal.
I've been super excited for the last you look back just before Privateer Press started putting stuff out. You had Games Workshop level and
Mm-hmm.
then it was a big dip down to everybody else. And then when Privateer Press started bringing stuff out, they started challenging Games Workshop with their quality. Then you had the other company that puts out a ton of minis that I just had on the tip of my tongue and totally forgot. They make the Bones minis.
Reaper.
Reaper,
Yeah.
Reaper. When they started, especially when they started coming out the bone cast stuff, their quality started getting better. So everybody's really been getting uh, better minis. And when I was at Gamma this year, some of the minis that were coming out for the different board games and stuff, just this isn't anything that we would have seen 5 years ago,
Oh
let
yeah.
alone 10 or 15 years ago.
Absolutely. And speaking of Reaper, if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to speak for them, but I heard that they're using SeoCast on some of their stuff as well. I've heard some of the new minis are, and I know that Infinity um, is doing SeoCast as well. So I think for anybody who's interested in SeoCast, you're going to start seeing it appear more and more in our industry as a material that you'll have access to.
Nice. And does look like Reaper is doing a line of stuff with SeoCast.
Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say that and then all of a sudden be like, oh crap, I'm telling lies about Reaper on a live stream.
Um, now Reaper's been putting out some pretty cool stuff. It was funny because for a long time they were putting out good quality, but they weren't putting out uh, in Citadel minis and Games Workshop. They traded on the brand of we make the best minis, and for a long time they did. But just looking at where the industry is now, and a small company like you guys coming out and saying, "Hey, we're going to put out minis that are just as good or better and to compete with you." So I'm excited to see these minis when we can see them in person.
Yeah,
Um, let's see another question.
yeah,
Technology is perpetually advancing, making miniatures more detailed, easier to paint, quicker to model and sculpt. End users can print their own models more easily with STLs. Filament becomes even stronger and cheaper. So, what new technology in miniature design has BAM and we've been talking about the COcast,
yeah. And
um,
SeoCast.
and well, so what makes you guys producing minis with COcast better than what people can be able to try to print at home with a high? Not I'm not talking like the $100 Harbor Freight special. I'm talking about the like people that have dropped a couple grand into a resin printer.
Oh, sure. So, I mean, there does come a point where if you've spent that much money on a super high end resin printer, the difference in fidelity between the miniature details starts to be, that gap starts to close more and more and more and more and more. So, if you have a couple $1,000 put down into a resin printer, you're probably going to be able to get a quality that is comparable to the miniatures that we're going to be selling, for $20 for a pack of minis. So I think the thing is that we're able to provide that quality of miniatures to people that don't have that much money sunk into the super high end technology that has not been adopted by the majority of the market at this point. Um, and so, yeah, but for somebody who's on the highest possible end, you're probably printing as well as any company out there right now.
Yeah, because some of the had a friend who just picked up a couple very high end printers because he 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 wanted to make his own minis, and the quality, I was blown away. But again, I think one of his printers was $3,900. So
Yeah. And
um,
that is definitely not something you can ask of everyone because,
yeah,
whether we're RPG, tabletop gamers as a whole, we're all hobbyists, right? We have our hobby, but going into that level of 3D printing is like that's like being a car guy, right?
yeah,
You're like I'm going to drop a ton of money and make this, my thing, and it's worth it. It pays out great, but you really got to put the time in it.
yeah. But I mean, if he wants to make a new tank, it takes him like
Yeah,
2 days of printing
yeah.
to make a tank.
Right. If he wants to make the Rocktopus, which I've been seeing all over social media of the Rock's head on an octopus body, he could probably make a great looking Rocktopus.
I have not seen that.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to look that up. Question in the chat: how long would you
Yeah.
say a typical game of Rivenstone takes to play?
An hour. So we did a tutorial battle report, myself and Faye. It's on YouTube now on the Broken Anvil Minis YouTube. And that was us taking our time to explain the rules to the viewers as we were going. And that game took us 2 hours, and we played a full game. And so, and again, that was us like, here's how you attack, here's how you move, here's how you interact with a scenario element. Um, I think when people are teaching themselves how to play, reading the rule book, those games will probably be an hour and a half to 2 hours. Your first, 4 or 5 games as you're getting the hang of the intricacies, and then after that, hour. Our longest games where we were just going back and forth were hour and a half at most, and that was when somebody like went into the tank and it was like, "Oh, what's the right move? Do I do this? Do I do that?"
And I will tell anybody out there that if they search Rocktopus, they will never be disappointed because not only have I seen uh, the Rock's head on an octopus body, I've seen an octopus giving devil horns, and the Rock's head on Doc Ock's body.
Oh yeah, there was a while where there was a trend in 3D printing. The Rocktopus came out, and everyone was showing out their variants of the Rocktopus.
Never wasn't on my list of things that popped up. That cracked me up.
Yeah.
Oh my god! And yes, there's there's so many things with the Rock's head on them. Why?
Oh, there's Crocs. You can print out full-on shoes with the Rock's head on the end of them. You get your Crocs.
Slugs, EVs. Yeah. Oh my god, that's bonkers. Yep, definitely something you should search one of these days.
What has technology done?
Yes. Will Rivenstone be available as STL files?
No, they will be physical only, and that was a decision that was made very early on. Supporting local game stores, supporting the community is incredibly important to everyone at Broken Anvil. That's where I grew up. I grew up in the game store culture, and have been there my whole life. And so, we're not at the point yet where I think STL's supporting retail. Like, they can to some degree, but for a major product launch, we need to make sure that stores can buy it, and stores can sell it to their customers. And this is by far a
place for them to play, because it's the old saying: you can't play Magic at Walmart. You can't play tabletop miniature games on a 3D printer.
Right. Yeah, and people can play at home, of course, but there is no. So we could spend $1 million on ads on YouTube and Facebook and everything we want. There is no better marketing in the planet than two people playing at the game store, and people walking by and going, "That looks cool. What's that?" Every game I've gotten into in my life was because I saw people playing it or one of my friends was playing it.
Well, going back to GW, their most profitable store for ages was their smallest store in a mall in London. The little 4x4 demo tables that they usually have in their shops. When the store was closed, it was literally only big enough to put that in there. The store was tiny, but they would pull that out into the hall, into the walkway, and just have all the minis set up, and somebody standing there willing to teach people how to, run through the initial games. Like, oh my god, this is so cool! I want to buy.
Yeah.
Good minis and a fun game will make good sales.
Yeah. And also the reason I'm in this industry, the reason I like my profession as a game designer is because I'm a huge proponent of face-to-face interaction. Like, I'm not doing video. Like, my background is in computer science. I have a degree in computer science, but I went into tabletop because it was very important to me growing up, and I want something that will get passed on to my kids and other people's kids. And so I think it's very important for us to always have a thing where we can sit down, you across from me at the table, and meet over something we love and have a good time, face-to-face, flesh and blood.
And as someone that played with the metal minis for ages, I'm very happy that nobody really makes metal minis anymore. I had a Chaos Dreadnought thrown at me because I had an angry player across from me. He threw it hard enough it went into the sheetrock, into the wall behind me at the hotel we were playing the tournament at.
Yeah, that's a straight up weapon. That's a straight up weapon at this point.
Yeah, he was kicked out of the tournament, and I won. I won third place and best sportsman.
Nice. I'm glad he was kicked out because throwing a huge chunk of metal at someone's head, it's kind of illegal, just a little bit.
Yeah. He was just very angry. I was playing. This was third edition. I was playing third edition 40K and had shooty orcs, which were horrible at the time. but I played them very well. I optimized everything, and I ended up blowing up his dreadnought with rockets out of squad of orcs, and
And he threw a dreadnought at you.
just flipped out because three rockets from a squad of orcs hit, and all three of them hit. You need fives and sixes to hit with orcs at the time in shooting. So I roll all fives and sixes, and then just I roll as high as possible, just torch his dreadnought, and he flips out because that thing would have come into my units and just started eating me away, and just he flips out and like cusses at me and chucks it at me. And then the tournament organizers were nearby, just like, come with me. He's like, what about my army? We'll pack it up for you. What about my model that I threw? He's like, well, you'll have to talk to the hotel about getting that out of the wall.
Man, I've gotten salty during games, during things, and as somebody who has run like global volunteer forces and run conventions, I've seen some wild stuff out there where people losing their mind, but I can't imagine getting so mad at another person over toys that I would throw one at their head.
Yeah, like when I was younger, I remember getting mad at a Magic tournament because I only took fourth, but I didn't take it out on anybody else. Like as I was walking out the door, I cussed at a table and flipped a little table. And when I got home,
Sure.
I was like, nope, done, not playing Magic anymore. I play a little Magic now and then now, but I have not played in tournament or anything since 1999. And
Sure.
even Warhammer, I got overly competitive with playing Tau in a time period when everybody said, "Oh, Tower totally unplayable. You can't win with them." So I was like, "Oh, damn it, I'm going to do it." And then I found myself getting like overly competitive, and I was like, oh, "I just need to back off." And the wife says, "Hey, why don't you play orcs?" And I was like, "Okay, you're gonna tell me to buy another army? Right on."
Deal. I'm in. I have an orc army as well, and it's impossible not to have fun with them because like that's one of the reasons I love Blood Bowl so much. Is sometimes you're like, "What's happening?" Okay, roll the dice and see if I'm dead or not.
So the funny thing is, I took the being non-competitive so much that I said my orcs got into my Tau encampment overnight and repainted all my drones. So all my drones have like various smiley faces painted on them very badly.
Nice.
And I actually would take them to a GW shop that told me I couldn't bring that army in any longer. And I was like, what? I was like,
why
because
not?
it's funny because all my battle suits and vehicles and everything were painted decently, but all my drones had smiley faces, and it's just not a properly painted army. I was like, whatever.
Yeah. So you got a narrative for it. It made sense.
Yeah, it was. Somebody said lead minis taste better.
No, they don't.
Also, can't play Magic in Walmart. Challenge accepted.
I mean, it's fair. You can play Magic basically anywhere you want.
There was a news story about 10 years ago. There was a lady making meth in the aisles of Walmart. So if a lady can make meth in the aisles of Walmart, I guess we could probably sit in the aisles of Walmart and play Magic.
Yeah. People have seen so much weird stuff in Walmart. No one's going to walk up to you if you're sitting there playing Magic and care at all. They might grumble at you as they go around to get their frozen peas, but that's it.
Oh, that's the best place. You gotta do it right in the middle of the frozen food aisle. You can't do it over in the toy aisle. You gotta do it in the frozen food aisle.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Maximum visibility.
But you gotta play Ice Age block.
Oh wow.
Frozen
really on
lands.
brand. Yeah.
Somebody Green Tide. Yes, I have a massive Green Tide. I have a 5-gallon bucket of Orc Boys. So
nice.
I have a bit of a Green Tide. The unpaid boys. Let's see. What does success look like for Broken Anvil minis with this new endeavor?
Obviously the Kickstarter funding, which I really hope that happens. I'd be very surprised if it didn't. But for me, the thing I'm looking at, obviously the business-minded people are looking at the dollar amount that we make on the Kickstarter. I'm looking at the backer number because that's how many people we've established in the community to start. And to me, I feel like 2,500 to 3,000 backers on the, if we get that much, anything above that is gravy. But if we have that many people established that are interested in wanting to play in the world, then we can definitely build something phenomenal out of that. So to me, that's what I'm looking at. But
yeah, and backer number sometimes is because you look at some of these Kickstarters like, oh, you got $1 million, but you got 3,500 backers, where somebody else has $1 million and has like 11,000
Right.
backers, because they're at a lower, they've gone to a lower price point to try to get the product into more people's hands. Um,
Right.
Now you're going to have, you're doing something that's probably going to be a little higher point than a single RPG book, because it'll be small starter sets and stuff for the armies, which tend to model miniature game starter box sets tend to be a little more than a RPG book cost wise.
We're gonna be so if most RPG books these days are in the 50 to 60 range for a hardcover, especially a new core rule book, these starter army boxes, which again are the rule book and all the tokens and like I think you get 16-ish models in the box, big models. They're gonna be $99. So we're definitely more than just getting a single book for an RPG, but I think we're in a good spot in the market. We're definitely inexpensive compared to a lot of other minis games to get into. And then even for an RPG, some of them that you need to buy 2 or 3 books to really get going, or have your players buy multiple books. We're in a good competitive spot there, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, 99 bucks for a starter army is not bad. Um, Not bad at all. So I'm intrigued to see where you guys, because I want to see the models. I want to see where you're going with the different products. I do want to keep up to date with all of it for when you guys do get to RPGs.
Mm-hmm.
Playtesting. What have you guys done playtesting wise?
Oh, so much. I mean, so before we had Faye Repus is our lead game developer. We were playtesting, pretty much every day, both internally and with external groups. But my time was being split between game design and doing the game development. And I remember very early on, Chris telling me, he's like, "What do you need for the department?" And I was like, "The first thing I need is a developer. I need someone who can. This is what they do 100%." And he was like, "Do you have any suggestions?" And I was, we talked about some options, and Faye was at the top of the list. And very happy that she joined on. Faye's been doing game development for many years now, and Faye is if it's checks and balances, she's the one who makes sure I don't go too crazy. But a big thing she does is she runs all the external playtest programs, and she runs playtest internally. Pretty much like if she works an 8-hour day, 4 hours of it is playtest. But whereas I'm designing the rules from scratch, I then hand them to Faye. Faye breaks them for me and goes either, "Oh, this works great, it's doing what you want it to, and it's balanced and fun," or "This works and it's overpowered, so we got to tone it down," or "This is just blue screening the game, we need to redo it." And having her give me that feedback constantly helps to where we're putting out a rules, like the rules will be very easy to understand, and hopefully we don't have any like oversights that we have to like errata day one or anything like that. So ton of playtest is going into this game.
Nice. Yeah, especially in mini games, getting the playtesting out there is super important. Have you gotten with any groups to do blind playtesting?
Yes, we've done blind play testing with a few groups, giving them just the text rule book and handing off to them and being like, "Hey, check it out," which has gone really well. We made sure we grabbed people also we could get locally that don't play miniatures games at all, and walk them through it and see what they were able to understand, what they got hung up on, what was too much. And then our biggest blind test, the big petri dish test, was going to Adepticon. We went to Adepticon and demoed to people. So we would set up at like 7 or 8 a.m. and shut down the demo at 6:30-ish p.m. Every day we went there, we had a line. It was demoing, and there was a queue of people waiting to demo, and everyone who demoed would walk away saying, "This game is awesome. I love it. I can't wait." That was a ton of fun. And so that was and we had one of our owners, Chris, there, who has definitely had a little anxiety of like, "Oh, what are people going to think? What do people think?" And I know that he's had a huge relief. He walked away from that show being, so much stress off his shoulder, being like, our baby's in the world and people love it.
What other shows are you guys planning on hitting in the next year or two?
So we're going to build an extensive convention schedule. Part of the thing, like we went to Adepticon because we were seeing where we were in terms of production, and we want to make sure we weren't showing to the show with any prototype materials. We wanted the real dice, the real tokens, the real miniatures, and everything, and all that got put together. So we're building our con schedule this year as we can, as we find places we can get into, and then next year we should be more solidified. So it's hard for me to say, will we be at Gen Con this year? I would love to be at Gen Con, but I don't know if we're in time to get there. I would love to be at Origins this year. Las Vegas Open, Warfare Weekend, obviously the next Adepticon, just a ton of shows like this that we want to go to.
Yeah, I think Gen Con's already, because they just announced their 500 different booths, which is
Right.
pretty bonkers. They just put that list out this morning, I think it was. Even though Origins is sooner, you still probably have a chance to be able to get into Origins. I know that they're a little more flexible,
Yeah.
but yeah, all the libraries should be at Origins and Gen Con this year.
Yeah.
Funding issues. It's not cheap
It
to
was
get those
that was
places.
Yeah. My guess would be, and this is my guess, is that we'll be at Origins, and then I hope we're at Gen Con. And if we're not at Gen Con this year, would be shocked if we weren't next year.
Yeah. And if you don't get into Gen Con, what you need to do is look at, you don't get in this year, you need to look at the list of booths that are there and reach out to some of those companies, because some of those companies you can share booth space with.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
sometimes they'll be like, oh, hey, we're not going to do as big of a presence this year, so they'll basically sublet like half their booth, which is never a bad thing.
And the thing this year, especially because the Kickstarter goes live next week, and then it's probably 8 months to 12 months at the longest for the actual turnaround to ship everything out. And then from there's no more Kickstarters for Riverzone. It's all regular Hobby Channel release.
Yeah.
What that means is, if we went to Gen Con this year, we don't have anything to sell yet.
Yes.
So we could go and demo, but that's why next year we would definitely be like big booth selling all the products, the normal presence.
Yeah. Big show for you guys to start a kickoff next year is Gamma.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting Gamma, yeah, and sitting there with the product and getting in front of the industry and other businesses.
Yeah, so back for Privateer, I used to do like 17 shows a year, and always loved going to Gamma, Alliance, ACD. There's so many good shows. Plus, I got to go to a lot of good places and have a lot of good food. I always loved going to ACD Games Day because it's in Madison, Wisconsin, and they have just the best cheese curds I've ever had in my life.
Oh, there's something I miss about the cheese curds from the Upper Midwest.
Yeah, they got to.
Just everybody's like, I like Tillamook cheese here, but it's just 7 out of 10, and all the cheese places you go to back in Wisconsin and Minnesota are 11 out of 10 comparatively.
Yeah. If you're ever in Madison, there's a place called the Old Fashioned downtown, and it's just the best food you're ever going to put in your body. You're going to gain a quick 40-50 pounds. It's worth it. Go and do it.
There's a reason why there's a lot of big husky people in the Midwest.
Yeah, they're happy. They're happy though.
Let's see. So somebody said, "What's the target date for availability?" So you said Kickstarter is next week. Kickstarter runs for how long?
The Kickstarter runs for a month, and then the turnaround time. There's some internal factors. I would say at the earliest, if everything goes 100% perfect, 3 months. If we need a little extra time because of a delay of getting an external material, like maybe the rule books, something we're not producing in-house, that'd be 12 months. But somewhere in that window. My realistic guess is probably 8 months. Late Q4, early Q1, 2023.
Okay. And you're producing all the minis right here in Washington?
Yep, everything's produced in-house. Everything's being nice. Like, we have the COCast machines and all of our team here, so it's all like the only stuff that's being done externally is just the stuff, tokens, measurement tools, dice, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the things that other people do in bulk already.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you need a ruler? Yeah, we can do that.
Right.
And you're not making up new measurements for the game.
No, we're not.
And it's like, oh, I'm going to use sminces. What's that? Well, that's like an inch, but it's a little different. Doesn't quite translate. You have to use our specialty ruler of sminces.
Yeah, we're not doing any sminces.
Yeah, I've actually seen a couple game companies try that in the past, and it's just like people are like, nope. If I can't just pull out a tape measure or a ruler and play the game because I forgot it, I don't want to have to, learn to convert your specialty freaking measurements.
Yeah,
Can you
all
take
the
out
distances in Rivenstone.
your ruler and play
Oh,
the game because I forgot it. I have to. My cell phone is going bonkers.
yeah, I
Especially
was supposed to got a little bit of feedback.
frick. Yeah. Oh, because I have a random alarm that went off on my cell phone that turned the volume back on. Um,
Uh, so, like
it,
in our game, we use measurement tools, but the sticks are all 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, 6 inch, 9 inch, 12 inch, right? And so, like if something refers to the far distance, that means 12 inches. So you get these little sticks that you can use for that. But if you ever lose your sticks, you can also measure out 12 inches if you need to.
nice. As somebody
Right.
said, no measuring in cubits.
No cubits, no.
Um, I had another question. My stupid phone made me forget. I do want to come take I'd love to come take a tour of your guys' shop and just see because I want to see the COcast machines in production.
Yeah, I'm sure we can make that happen. We could talk to Chris and see what we could do.
Yeah. Um, there's also some small game conventions locally that because I mean you're gonna have a team that's going out to local stores, which I may or may
Yep.
not know a lot of them. I'm sure you guys know a lot of the local game store owners as well.
Yeah.
Um, but things like OrcaCon, Dragonflight, we just had NorwestCon, stuff like that. All these little conventions that I guarantee you guys can get into and be right there at the forefront of many people that are straight in the hobby and have a weekend dedicated to um, staring at product.
Yeah, yeah, and we want to try and we have to find that balance of basically employee resources and what we can go to. But if we had infinite time, we would go to every show we could, especially OrcaCon. Like I love everyone involved in OrcaCon, and it's been a long time since I've walked in the doors of that show.
Yeah, they've actually been well. A lot of the conventions have been awesome with us in the library. So like Dragon Con, OrcaCon have been great for us. Um, been a wonderful place for us to be able to just share role playing games with people.
Yeah,
Somebody keeps asking about or LGS demos of Rivenstone. So what are your
yeah.
plans? You kind of touched on them a little bit earlier in the chat, but expand upon your the plans.
So not this weekend, but basically starting next weekend, and then every weekend through May, we're going to be at a local Seattle local game store. We're going to have an event schedule up on the Rivenstone Facebook page. We're going to be going to both Moxes. I believe we're going to be going to one of the uncles. We'll be going to Terra Crux, but all of that information will be up on the calendar. But I know that myself, Faye, Jordan Lamb, our studio painter, are all going to be there hanging out. So
Nice.
check out the social media or check with your local game store if you're in the area basically between Tacoma and Seattle, uh, and see if they're going to be having any demos going on.
Nice. Will you have, or so that'll be on your guys' website?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on the Riven. I don't know if it's on RivenstoneGame.com. That's going to be the main like Kickstarter and information page. It might show up on that page, but I think it's definitely going to be on the Rivenstone Game socials, like on Facebook and Twitter and stuff like that.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, and I like some of the stuff you got. So in the Kickstarter, how many different armies are going to be available?
There's
Or
four
warbands?
primary factions. Yeah, there's four primary factions, and then beyond the starters, there's additional add-ons and expansions you can get for each of your different war bands. So, and there's a little something for everybody. Do you want to talk a little bit about? I guess I can talk a little bit about the lore of Rivenstone, so I can
Go
explain
for it.
what they are real quick. Okay. There's a lot, so I'll try to make this brief so that I don't ramble on for too long. So here's the general concept of the world. Rivenstone is a high fantasy world where magic is not this ethereal thing that wizards pluck out of thin air. Magic grows in big crystalline deposits called Rivenstone that you can walk up to and you can mine and pull out of the ground. And since history, recorded history began, every society on the planet has used it in different ways. Some people use it for religious purposes. Some people use it for traditional magic. They use it as a reagent to cast spells. A lot of people use it for technology, for fuel, whatever it might be. 400 years ago in the setting, a group of mages called the Augurs decided it would be a good idea if all of society was growing and flourishing by using Rivenstone. If one group got all of the world's Rivenstone, they would be able to evolve and sort of transcend humanity and make the world a better place for everyone. So they went on a giant war and they got all the world's Rivenstone from everybody because a lot of people weren't happy with them about this. And they succeeded, and they did their experiment, and it succeeded. And so the Augurs, as they were called, evolved and transcended reality. They've gone somewhere else. And in the process, the wake of their experiment, the Rivenstone exploded, and it became the Riven Storm. It changed forms from solid to weather pattern. So the Riven Storm passes over the world for 400 years, and it's basically raining down wild magic on the world. So everyone who survived went into hiding, put up magical wards. They found some way to protect their culture. And when the game takes place, the storm has begun to abate, and like magma in a volcano cooling back to rock, as the storm is finally dissipating after 4 centuries, the stone is growing back. So you are playing war bands belonging to one of the surviving nations, kingdoms, empires, who are sending soldiers out into the transformed wilderness of the world to explore and find out what's going on, and more importantly, to go get Rivenstone again, because everyone's been denied it for 400 years, and there's sort of this resource arms race as everyone is trying to go get it back, because basically no one has learned their lesson and that this is incredibly volatile stuff and you shouldn't fight over it. And so every game centers around there being Rivenstone deposits on the table, various narrative scenarios you're playing, the various global narrative effects of the area you're in and what kind of magic is affecting it, and you're playing these small little model count, scouting parties going out and skirmishing over an area where they can set up a new mining operation. So the 4 factions are the Shattered Empire, which are the humans. Their big thing is during the storm, humans began to be born changed. The magic storm actually affected their bloodline, and humans began to be born missing limbs, arms, legs, whatever it might be. And in its place was an organic Rivenstone growth coming out of their body. And so humanity saw this as a sign that these were blessed people. So their technology became arcane prosthetics that they could hook over the Rivenstone growth, and the person could power this leg or arm that was far too big for a normal human to wield. So they became the Stone Touched. And so the humans are this mix of almost this Final Fantasy-esque element where you have soldiers that have, long rifles with bayonets on them. But then you have individuals like a knight, a traditional medieval knight, but he has a gigantic prosthetic metal arm that's wielding this huge sword that's way too big for anyone to wield. And their whole thing is they're trying to go out and find the scattered remnants of humanity to recreate their shattered empire. That's one of the warbands. The Oryx are the orcs who survived the storm out in the wilderness and have become bigger and stronger and tougher than they ever were before because they just weathered the whole thing. To do so, they became master tamers of the wilderness. So all the mutated wildlife, like the murder birds or the saber fangs, they tamed and turned into beasts of labor or beasts of war. So the orcs are sort of they're orcs. They're sort of like Savage Land orcs. So imagine like an orc wearing metal armor with a giant axe riding a giant saber tiger. That's the Oryx. The Iron Guard are the dwarves, who are the masters of mining, who during all of this basically hid in their mountain because it was dangerous to go outside. And they used to run sort of the world's global economy. They were the master merchants. And their technology has not gone forward, but all of their technology is a mix of something that could be a mining equipment and a weapon at the same time. So you'll have people that have drill fists, or they'll have flare guns that they use as pistols. And so you have this mining tech equipment style dwarf army, and they're going back out, seeing that Rivenstone is coming back, and they're like, no, everyone's going to screw up this. We're going to lay our claim on all the world's Rivenstone. We'll go mine it for you safely, and we'll get it back out to everyone. And everyone's like, no, we saw how that went last time. So the orcs, the dwarves are kind of at odds with that. And then the last faction are the Risen, When the augurs were doing their experiment, one kingdom tried to stop them. This kingdom marched out from across the continent trying to get to them, and as they were about halfway through their march, the storm happened and they were killed to a person. 200 years go by, the storm passes back over them, and they were all resurrected as undead. And so the Risen are necromancers by necessity. They've had to learn dark magic, and they've had to learn necromancy to keep their people together and use magic to basically like, oh, Jimmy had his skull knocked off. We need to put it back on because now he's a sentient person. So they're not mindless undead. They are the noble undead who have had to go down a dark path to just keep being who they are. And they're trying to make sure nobody makes the same mistakes, even if they have to put them to the sword.
Nice.
And that's our 4 main factions you'll get to play. I think one of the cool things about the world is whatever kind of terrain table you want to build, it makes sense in the world of Ven. If you want to build a world of a traditional castle, makes sense. Traditional medieval village, makes sense. A factory, makes sense. Floating islands, there was a place affected by the Riven Storm that wild magic hasn't left that area, makes sense. A sentient bioluminescent forest that can speak and is made out of teeth, makes sense. Like it could be because the wild magic, some areas were untouched, some areas were just decimated, traditional, just ruined, and then some areas were evolved, mutated by magic. You can do anything that your imagination can come up with. Now we have a map and we're going to say like this place is here, and so on and so forth, but we have big blank areas that say this is kind of whatever you want it to be as you're telling your story. This is whatever strikes your fancy you want to be creative with. So in RPG terms, when we start doing RPG materials, we'll have our established, areas to go adventuring in, and we'll have areas where it can be whatever the DM wants to sock it in there that fits their story the best.
So in gameplay, I see that you have 3 different types of specialty dice. Why did you go with non-standard dice?
Because of the probabilities that we wanted to hit. It was actually easier. We wanted a focus on offensive rolls versus defensive rolls, and there's also a mechanic where one of the die facings doesn't count as a success unless you use a special resource in the game to count that roll as a success. And doing it on just pip dice would have actually been more confusing than using the symbols, because then it's very easy to go, okay, fists are a success if I'm attacking. Shields are a success if I'm defending. This symbol is a success if I spend this resource. And it also let us we can have abilities on models that say, if your attack roll included this symbol, trigger this new ability. Whereas if you do that with pip dice, it's a little bit clunkier. And so this worked out a little bit better.
Somebody asked about scale. You think you had said something about scale early on?
Yeah, the miniatures are 35 millimeter scale. The base sizes are 25, 32, 40, 50, 60. And the scale of miniatures is your personal warband is between 8 and 15 models on the high end. That kind of comes down to how you build your warband. If you want more elite, you have less models. If you want less elite, you have more models.
Until you bring out the apocalypse rules.
Be a while. Somebody brought that up. Because the people that have been, we have this lore series where we've gone through really deep in the lore, and people are like, oh, this would be like a great like a war game, like an army game. And I'm like, if we ever do that, it will be a different game. We will make new minis and a new rule set for it, because this game has been designed from the ground up to be small skirmishes in the wilderness, not rank and file guys marching at each other.
Yeah, your rule set for each are very different, and
yeah.
Games, well, that's why, when Warhammer brought out, when 40K brought out Apocalypse, like, hey, here's new entire rules. They had to introduce entire new mechanics. The base rules were the same, but your mechanics were very different. And that was just going from large army battles to massive army battles. Right. Then you look at any game that's done skirmish and, and large army battles, it just skirmish never ramps up, and you can never wind down an army-based game down to skirmish levels. Well,
I think there's DNA of the game that could translate between the two, but overall, it would be a total redesign to make it work for that scale.
Yeah, because from what I've been able to look at from that you guys have released and talking to you, I mean, if you try to scale this up too big, it would become a slog.
Yeah. And
All
the
the
game's
factions.
played on a 3x3 table. Like this is meant to fit. Like this doesn't take up a lot of space. We would want a 6x8 if we did a big army game, which
Yeah.
this rule set would not work well in that size.
Yeah, and that's always the problem is you when you have a more skirmish based game, if you try to ramp it up, it just you end up with so much stuff and oh my turn just took 45 minutes. You're like oh
Yeah.
wow, two turns just took almost what we did in what the proper size game would be an entire game.
And in Rivenstone being a skirmish game, it gets to be an alternating activation game. So you're never not playing for long. It's like I'm moving a couple models doing my things, then you're moving a couple models. It's not like I move my whole warband, you do your whole warband. We're constantly going back and forth, back and forth. Whereas army games, doing alternating activation army games is its own tricky business to make that work well.
Well, you have in the rule book how to convert normal D6s, D8 or D10s and D12s if somebody loses the dice.
No, that will not be in the rulebook, though the dice maps are available online. So if someone were to lose the dice, they could get themselves a blank dice that you could order online and you could write the facings on there. The D12 and the D10 in particular, the D10 you could probably convert. You'd have to have like a little written chart off to the side for
Yeah,
you. And you could do the same with the D12. So it's possible. It just wouldn't be easy. I think it'd be much easier just to grab a blank white D
yeah.
whatever and use a Sharpie and write it in if you had to.
Because I know playing games for years, people are like, oh man, I forgot my dice.
Yeah.
And you never want to share your dice.
For sure. And there will be replacements too. I mean, if somebody loses a die, I'm sure we're going to be able to hook them up and take care of them.
Yeah. Because that's always my frustration with specialty die. I know that because like Fantasy Flight for years have done specialty dice in all their games, but I'd always been frustrated with that because if you do forget your dice, you leave your dice at home. Now you have to convert them. But the advantages are always that you can do something different with the math of the dice.
Yeah. And that was a big thing here. It was really the driving mechanic behind why we did it.
Yeah, your magic math rocks fit your setting better than generic math rocks.
Yeah. Because I'm always a proponent of if something, don't do something just because it's pretty or do what makes sense. And if pips had made the most sense, if pips had been the easiest way to play the game, we'd have gone with pips. This is actually, once you learn the symbols, this is far easier than trying to use pips.
Yeah, it's, I tell designers all the time, don't make a new mechanic for the sake of making a new mechanic. I run into it all the time in RPGs, and I have to have that hard discussion with some individuals, like, okay, why did you do this? And it sometimes they'll stare at me like, am I trying to explain why my baby is ugly?
I had a really good conversation with somebody internally. So in the game, there's a rules for pushing things. Somebody can hit somebody with a sword and you can push them back. And there are certain weapons. You hit someone with enough concussive force, you push them back. But one of the characters has a harpoon gun. And there's other people that have like nets that they can pull people. And the rules for that say you push the model hit towards you X number. And they were like, why doesn't this say pull? And I'm like, we don't need a separate rule for pull. Push does everything we need, and we can simply say push away or push towards. If you write pull, you basically have to rewrite the rules for pushing and just double up, and one says away and one says towards, and we can simplify it into a single thing. And I'm always looking for things to do that way. So, while I guess...
And if you would have changed that to move, then you would have had people arguing over the ability to move your own models and other people's models.
Yes.
So you've got to find the fine line of name a mechanic without duplicating or overcomplicating mechanic or creating rules arguments.
Yeah, and for us it was move means I'm in control of the model's movement. Push means my opponent is in control of the model's movement, basically. And it was able to fit everything into those two categories very well.
Awesome. And yeah, and you'll probably get some people like, oh, you should have called it pull, but push works perfectly fine. And if you delineate the two in the rules books, like move is yours, push is your opponent.
Yeah, and for me, every time you add a rule, every time you write a rule sentence, you are adding an extra layer of complication that might confuse someone. So if you can say what you need to say and it makes in the least amount of words, you're doing your job as a game designer, because you don't, I never want to have anybody have a rules argument about the game. I want them to understand what's going on and their decisions to be the strategy, not the interpretation of the rules.
Let's see. Let's get into some of your background. We kind of touched on it a little bit. What was your first role playing game you played?
Dungeons and Dragons second edition.
Second edition. Ah, nice. Yeah, you definitely are younger than you look, or than you are. You look younger than you are.
Oh yeah, I'm 40. I'm 41.
Yeah, you're close. You're just a couple years younger than me. Um, I was also totally out of the norm because I started playing in first edition when I was really really young. But being the youngest of with a 9-year gap between my brother and I.
Yeah. Yeah, I started when I was 10, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 10 sounds
That's
right.
still younger than a lot of people. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
start until they're a teenager.
Yeah, or in their 20s or 30s. As
Yeah,
some people I know. Yeah.
exactly. I'm through the library. I'm running into more and more people in their 20s and 30s going, "Hey, I kind of always wanted to play.
Right.
Could I sit down and play?" Somebody said push pull. I prefer sachet. Uh,
Done. I'll re-edit it right now. So when Riverstone comes out, people are like, "Why does this say when you hit the enemy model, they sashay towards you?" That's on you.
yeah. They mosey a little closer, a little further
Yeah.
away. Just
They saunter. They saunter in your direction.
It's saunter is the you name them mosey and saunter. You will mosey your models forward. Your opponent will saunter your models.
Oh God.
You'd get a lot of people going, "Nope, I'm done."
Yeah, I'm out. Although if I made a Western game, a Western-based like historical war game, absolutely, you'd mosey and you'd saunter.
Yeah, I've sauntered, I've sashayed, I've never moseyed before. Am I
Yeah.
doing it right? Uh, let's see. So we covered. And what is your most played role playing game over the years?
Dungeons and Dragons. When it comes, I've played a lot over the years, but if I had to count up hours spent, it's D&D for sure. But I've played so many. I mean, there for the original White Wolf release when we were all playing Vampire and Werewolf. Played tons of Shadowrun, GURPS, tons of like Rifts, and even just like really obscure, weirder games. Like I remember when Whole came out, that we all had to start playing Whole. Do you know? Have you ever played Human Occupied Landfill?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a couple copies in the library.
Yeah.
That book was put out just to beat up the industry.
Yes, that is absolutely. I mean, it all looks like it was written on a napkin with crayon.
Yeah, it's so hard to
Yeah.
read.
Yeah.
I need to get the writer of that on stream to like clarify so many questions people have.
My favorite thing about that game, and for anybody who's not familiar, the idea is that you're playing on a landfill planet. It's a prison planet, and it's a planet where everybody sends their garbage, also where they send the worst prisoners. And they have the different monsters, but all of the prisoners on this planet are male. This is a male prison, and the scariest monster you can run onto on this planet is a baby. Like it was like a giant psychic mind flayer whenever you saw a baby on the planet, because people were like, "Where did this? How did it? Who made this? Where did it come from?" And the babies were like the big bads of the set.
I'm actually played Whole in so long. Let's see.
Yeah.
Somebody said red factions are customizable. What model does your number one custom faction consist of?
Oh, what model does your number one custom faction? So are they asking like my personal warband or?
Yeah, so they said I read that the factions are customizable. What
Yes.
models does your number one custom faction consist of? So I'm guessing
Oh,
you can take miniatures from different factions and make your own.
Yeah.
Like,
So
hey, this war band is merry band of brothers that have all made good.
yes. So when you build a coalition, the coalition tells you what factions you can pull from, specifically with keywords off of models, and you build from there. My personal warband includes a bunch of models that aren't out yet, but out of the stuff that's coming out in Wave One, I'm an Iron Guard player. I am a dwarf player. So my list has Director Hobart Cragdon on top of his Mindwalker, a Weldmonger, 2 units of Tunnel Fighters, and a unit of Miners Guild heavy operators. And I go to 3 hero games. I add a drill master and a unit of tunnel sweepers.
I like that. My army consists of stuff that you can't even play yet.
Yeah.
Spoken like a true game designer.
There's a 5th faction called Wild, and there's only 2 models at launch for Wild, and Wild gets expanded on later. And Wild is not a nation or a kingdom. Wild was we need a place for our monsters and our dragons and our madmen and our mercenaries. And there's various coalitions there. My warband is a Wild warband, and I think the models for it will not be out until like the end of 2023. But once they're out, that's what I'll be playing.
Nice. You got in the emails chatting back and forth about player character confessionals. Do you have a confessional for role playing game?
Do I have a confessional for role playing?
Yes,
like
a character one. So the idea is you tell us what game you name the character was a half dwarf, half drow, bard in D&D 3.5 named Samus, and then you pause and then in character tell us what they did. Whether it was they stole the key and made everybody run around for an extra 6 months in game before they revealed that they had the key everyone was looking for, or you were the reason why you a party was killed.
Okay. Let me think if I've ever done anything egregious like that. Oh,
we all have.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the character's name. It was in D&D 5e. It was a halfling monk drunken master. And I can't remember. God, I can't remember what I named that character. So I only got to play him for a handful of sessions, and we were just having very casual gaming. But the confession would be, no one knew that I was a drunken master or what I was capable of because I stayed drunk the whole time and never fought once.
That's actually very hilarious. So it's actually been a whole lot of fun. We've been chatting for about an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to add on before we sign off for the evening?
No, for anybody who's watching, if anything we've talked about interests you, just give one more plug. Go to rivenstonegame.com. There's a newsletter. You can sign up right now to get more information. And if you want to watch an actual gameplay video, you can go to our YouTube channel, check out the Broken Anvil Minis YouTube channel. But also on the rivenstonegame.com are links to lore blogs, gameplay blogs, and looks at more miniatures. So if this has sparked your fancy, that's where you need to go. And please check out the Kickstarter going live on the 26th.
Yep. And check out their website as well for the STL files and their Patreon for the RPG add-ons that they've been doing through the company. So that have all led up to, hey, we want to do something crazy like launch a miniatures tabletop game.
Yeah. If you want to check that out, that's at brokenanvilminis.com. Nice.
So thank you very much for coming on, and thank you all at home for tuning in and being interactive and asking questions. We love having people ask questions along with me because I'm just one brain, and you guys are a whole lot more brains out there in more ways than one. So, keep tuning in and help us ask more questions. So, I'll say good night.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for hanging out.
And library is now closed.
Bye.